Hello, Circularity. So excited to be back. One of the best parts about my job is that I get an opportunity to be in community with some amazing young professionals of color, two of which we have here on our stage here today. And we're going to talk a little bit about youth perspectives, emerging perspectives towards that shift in the circular economy, okay? And so as emerging young leaders of color who hail from communities who are, in many respects, deeply impacted by wasteful industry and broken systems, it's important that we know that the time is now for us to shift from extraction to regeneration. And we are driven by the urgency that we know is going to be required and is necessary for us to stem the tide of climate change and to produce a truly just and equitable transition. And so, joining me in discussion today are two of our amazing emerging young leaders from the Circularity 24 cohort. We have Drexlar Attram, or Drex. She's a Master of Science student in Sustainability Management at Columbia University's School for Professional Studies, where she brings a focus on deeply understanding the interconnectedness between environmental and social issues. And in addition, we also have Anjali Malpani, who is a Senior Business Partnerships Manager for rePurpose Global, where she specializes in helping consumer packaged goods companies take decisive action on plastic waste, work towards their sustainability goals in packaging, and effectively communicate their efforts to stakeholders. I'm so excited. Please welcome them to the stage. This is their first time on a keynote stage, and I'm so excited to have this conversation. So please, please, give us the energy that we need, and we're going to give it right back in return. So I'm going to ask you, actually, Anjali, first. From your perspective, you have a global perspective where you look at reuse in many different contexts. And I'm interested in what emerging circularity trends that you're seeing in your work that are challenging the status quo. And as you talk about that, how are they actually impacting that shift to a circular economy?
Yeah, so hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. I think if there's one thing that all of us can agree on, it's that the world is changing at a pace that was frankly unimaginable before. And the world of sustainability in particular has changed more in the last 3 years than it did in the last 3 decades. It's really an exciting time to be here. And I've had the privilege and the pleasure of talking to hundreds of brands in the last couple of years. And I think if there's one key takeaway that I have, is that sustainability is absolutely not a choice anymore. Your brand needs to stand for something. And consumer perception about this is at an all-time high. And I am a very firm believer that consumers drive change in this economy. And they drive that change with their purchasing power, with their dollars. They invest in products that they believe in, that they trust in. And this also, frankly, comes from social media. I'm pretty sure that every single product line that is represented at GreenBiz today either has a product ingredient breakdown on Reddit, or it has a packaging breakdown on a reel in TikTok. But it's really their decisions, the impact that they want to make with their dollars that's driving the change. And you see that reflected in brands of all sizes, be it companies that are just designing their packaging for a product idea that they had, or be it Fortune 500 companies. So it's really about not what about your company is gaining by investing in impact and sustainability, but what are you willing to lose if you don't? So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. And in a similar vein, Drex, from your perspective, especially as a student, you're deeply engaged with the new and emerging trends that are happening, especially in your work in the community. Can you talk a little bit about some of the trends and systemic change that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I work with a nonprofit in New York City called the New York City Fair Trade Coalition, where we focus on textile waste management solutions for vulnerable populations in Harlem. And I would say that specifically with the textile industry, I mean, the growth of the secondhand market in the Western world has just boomed. And to your vein, because of social media, I mean, influencers and just the ability to spread information so quickly has just allowed consumers to mobilize to mobilize and push for trends. So I think the fact that like thrifting has become so popular in the past 5 years has really also led a lot of like fashion brands to consider these circular concepts, whether it's through like take back programs, recycled lines, and drop-in bins. I think that, yeah, looking at consumer trends can definitely shapes business practices, specifically in the textile industry for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking about just the ways that businesses, for example, can be responsible or attuned to the changes that are happening in this shift to circularity, really we're thinking about broadly the fact that businesses can be drivers of social change. And so from your unique perspectives, and feel free to jump in wherever you feel like jumping in here, how can businesses think about their role in shaping that shift to a regenerative future?
Yeah, I mean, business has always just had such an influence on society, and especially, I mean, everyone in here is a consumer in some way, shape, or form, and I think a growing sentiment that I see on social media, especially amongst my generation, is that like people will go to Target and let Target tell them what they want to buy. So I think that a business has very much done in the past, been able to shape consumer behavior as well. Through marketing, through packaging, business tells us what we want to buy, when we want to buy it, how we want to buy it. And I think that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can use those traditional, relatively like psychological tactics to push consumers to also adopt circular practices. I mean, imagine if something like Walmart would have dispensaries and refilleries for cereal, for milk, for these then consumers are already being exposed to circular concepts without even realizing it, and maybe they would start to adopt circular practices. I think business should start taking a little bit more responsibility on their role to drive change as well, and not just only push it onto consumers to fix a problem that we didn't create.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anjali, do you want to talk about that as well?
Yeah, and I think I can talk a little more from a business side of things, where I would say that everyone should just talk more about, of course, your successes, but also the tests that didn't work, the things that you piloted, but they ended up failing. This is 100% a collaborative industry, and if one of us wins, all of us win.
Yeah.
And just to give you an example, even the fact that we're in this room today talking about these things, the ripple effects of the conversations that we're having in these rooms is unimaginable. I worked with 2 companies in India last year, and these are pharmaceutical companies. So this is one in a region where information about circularity, about circular initiatives is definitely not at the level that we would want it to be. And second, in an industry which cannot use any other material except plastic to package their things in. And at the same time, when they realized the awareness of their actions, of their packaging, it was really interesting to see how when they knew that they couldn't replace it in an upstream sense, they invested in downstream recovery programs. So today, just these 2 companies are bringing formal waste management to hundreds of villages in South India that never had it before. They are recovering 500 tons of plastic waste just because of their investments every year. And at the same time, they're building so much awareness in regions around consumption, around how to dispose waste properly, that just didn't exist before. And that is what really drives change. And what really excites me is that there are so many of us here, so the collective power that we have to bring that change, both as consumers and as companies, is tremendous. I think it's really fascinating to think about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what I'm hearing is business can be a driver of change, and that we don't necessarily need to just wait on policy or government to be the main driver, the influencers that push us in that direction, but we can actually take a responsibility as organizations and businesses and as an economy to actually make those consumer shifts ourselves. I'm really interested in, maybe in our last couple of seconds here, I imagine many of us in the audience are thinking, okay, this sounds great, but what advice do you have for us in how we can take a responsibility, and what wisdom might you have for us in how we can support you as young professionals in leading the way towards this regenerative future? In a couple of seconds, what do you think?
I think it's progress over perfection, always. Just not letting that idea of a perfect solution stop you from making small steps. I know that we're all trying to solve this really big problem, and there are so many different things that all of us are working on, and sometimes the steps that we're taking might not seem like they're making a huge difference against the huge goals that we have. But I'll be 40 in 2040, and I think the work that we're doing in the industry, the work that every single one of us is doing here today, will make it a different world, a radically different world that we probably can't imagine.
Absolutely.
So.
And with that, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause for our emerging leaders. Thank you so much.